Securities offered through Kestra Investment Services, LLC, Kestra IS, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Kestra Advisory Services, LLC, Kestra AS, an affiliate of Kestra IS. Capital Advisory Group, Inc. is not affiliated with Kestra IS or Kestra AS. Neither Kestra IS nor Kestra AS provide legal or tax advice and are not certified public accounting firms.
You work hard for your money. For the next hour, you're going to learn how to keep what's yours. Capital Advisory Group presents Keep What's Yours. Here is Josh Gilbert and Jeff Zufall.
Hello and welcome to Keep What's Yours with Jeff Zufall. I'm Josh Gilbert, sitting here with Jeff Zufall. He is the Senior Tax Strategist and Wealth Advisor with Capital Advisory Group. Hello, Jeff.
Hi, happy Saturday.
We are knee-deep in the thick of it. Oh,
maybe waist deep.
Neck deep. Yeah, I was going to say neck deep into the tax season. And I just came in this past week, Wednesday night, I came into the office. And normally you had paper stacked up, desk high. Now they're in boxes, and they're lined up against the wall. So I don't know if you guys have changed
we have
your storage systems.
A method to our madness now. Goes by date and when data comes in. So all of those boxes you saw actually were the dates that the returns came in. And then if they're missing anything, it kind of goes back through that cycle in a sense where we go get the data that we need, put it back in there. The file then comes back in, goes last in line, and it's kind of this assembly line.
And I got to tell you, we say all the time that paper is the kryptonite of the IRS.
Yes.
If we mailed in our tax returns, someone has to get it in the mail, open it up, see whose name is on it, key it into the system, run it through the machine. You know, that's why when you look at these stories, we talked about the Washington Post story over the summer, where they go into these IRS locations in Austin and where are they? Ogden, Utah.
We got Kansas City, Austin, Texas, and Ogden, Utah are our three.
You go into these facilities and there's just paper everywhere, boxes and boxes of paper. You know, their lunchroom, they can't even eat lunch in the building because all the lunch tables are filled with boxes of paper. Yeah. Paper is the kryptonite of the IRS. But when I came to you, I brought in a big stack of paper.
So all that gets scanned. None of it really touches. So there is a way. Sometimes you do have to upload you scan it, convert to a PDF. When the return's all said and done and you go to e-file it, you attach certain, I'll say, papers, documents to that either state or federal return, which kind of helps them when they get it. And I say helps them from a standpoint of maybe a 1099 where it's got 10,000 entries. We're not going to key that in line by line by line. It costs the client a fortune. So we'll kind of do an overview of it, but then we will include that 1099 as part of the tax return. That way nobody could ever question, hey, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
So stuff like that. The what's called circuit breaker or the property tax credit for state of Missouri. So if you're over 65, you make less than or have total income less than $30,000, you get a credit for your real estate taxes that you paid. And if you rent and your total income's lower than $27,000, you either get a piece of your rent back and or you get a piece of your real estate tax back. So those you have to take a paid real estate tax receipt and typically a Social Security statement, scan it, put it to the state return. That way the state can't come back and go, oh, we're sorry, we're not processing this because we don't have that paid, personal property tax receipt or real estate tax receipt. Sorry.
But you have paper all over your office, but when you go to key in my tax return, you're going to do it digitally. You're going to do it
totally digital,
electronic e-file.
We cringe when we have to send anything paper. Literally cringe
because it's going to take.
It's going to take forever
to get back.
Yes, and then some. And then we also figured out with the Postal Service, there's a way that we can do. It's not really a return receipt, but it's kind of like they'll deliver it to a PO box, and it gets scanned when it shows up, and it fires back an email to us that says, "Hey, this stuff was received." Everybody is, Mr. Smith at the IRS or the state of Missouri. Nobody really puts their true name on it, but at least we know it's received.
Yeah, Mr. Smith just got your package.
Yeah, but then we know that it's received, and the time clock starts ticking in a sense for us to check back in on it. But no, anything paper is terrible. Even though if you looked at our office, it's nothing but paper.
Yeah.
But that gets inputted into the returns, and then everything is digital from there.
And if you have to include something special, that'll be scanned in and sent over electronically to the IRS. And paper is just not efficient.
We've weekly, I get an email from somebody going, "Hey, here's an IRS letter we got," and it says the IRS says, "Hey, we're in receipt of your documents received a year ago, and we need 30 more days to review it." And it's just like,
I mean, of course. Can you imagine? I can't even imagine, Jeff, how this used to do in the 60s or the 70s.
Because the IRS had tons of people at every service center. So when you mailed it in, somebody touched it, and it was efficient. They actually had a pretty good system in play.
But they have cut staff down to the bone.
Way too much. Way
too much?
Yeah.
So this whole idea of them hiring some extra people,
it's good.
Oh, they need it.
They need it. They really, really do. I mean, and people are like, "Oh my gosh, that means we're going to get audited." Not necessarily. They're replacing the people who retired from a year ago. They're replacing them currently. So
they didn't have enough people a year ago, and people have retired since then.
They're like, "Get me out of here. I retire." If they're close enough or they could figure it out, they're long gone. So right now, it's basically a status quo. They've just hired enough to get back to their levels last year. I think there's 5,000 more than last year, and that's it. So,
and this idea of cutting staff at the IRS, probably a good idea with electronic filing and sending stuff in. Yeah, you probably don't need as many people as you used to have in the 70s, but I see you over there going, "But Josh, have you ever tried to call the IRS?"
Yes. Pre-COVID, yes, I agree 100%. After COVID, that just reset the deck completely. And, in their defense, they couldn't hire enough people quick enough to train them to get them back on board. So,
and it's not really, I mean, do they have to hire? Do you have to be a CPA? Do you have to be an accountant to work at the IRS?
I think the requirement was, everybody's like, "Oh, because they caught the one for the 2,000 people across the country that will carry arms." I mean, they carry a gun.
Oh, enforcement agents.
And they're enforcement agents. They need a gun for what they're talking to people about. In their own defense, honestly. But But the bigger picture, the people is basically a bachelor's degree. I mean, literally, if you are looking for a job, IRS is hiring.
They are.
It probably doesn't pay much, but the benefits are probably awesome.
So, government job.
Yeah.
And I heard a story. I don't know if you guys, this is lore in the tax preparation business. But the tax collectors back in the day, back in Germany, would walk around with Dobermans because they'd knock on someone's door, and, of course, someone said, "Get off my property."
Exactly.
And they'd say, "No, I need your taxes," or, Bosco here is going to have to
jump through the window and get you.
Yeah. So, I mean, nothing's changed.
Yeah.
Nothing's changed.
Nothing. Other than the state of California, they can't have, dogs. Canine dogs to do that anymore.
Oh, really?
That's apparently illegal.
Oh.
So
I hadn't heard that. Okay. 636-394-5524. Capital Advisory Group. I just got a call this week from your office, Kathy. She said, "Oh, we need your driver's licenses." Oh, okay. So, we turn our stuff in, but, as you guys pour through it, you guys might need a little bit more. Hey, your E-Trade account, just send me over the 1099 from that.
Exactly. Yeah. And we don't expect our clients to go, "Oh, here's exactly what."
Here's everything.
Yeah. Usually you're in a range. You might miss one or two things. And just you go, "Oh, yeah, that's right." So that's all part of it.
636-394-5524. And I saw a stat this week. I shared it with Heidi. 53% of people are going to enlist someone to help them with their taxes this year. 53%. Who are the 47% of people that are trying to do this on their own?
Ex-CPAs.
Are there that many of them out there?
There's a bunch.
I don't get this.
There's a
I
bunch.
don't get it at all.
And I mean no offense to anybody, but people that, again, at the end of the day, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you just said that for older adults who have mortgage insurance and they make less than, $30,000, how am I supposed to even know that that's a thing?
Yeah, and you wouldn't unless that was what you do. So we see trust returns that people will do on TurboTax, and I say this honestly. We've fixed 3 or 4 of them this year alone so far. There's probably more to come, but it's like, hey, you missed this or you missed that. I don't want to embarrass anybody.
Yeah.
But again, at the end of the day, you don't know what you don't know. So
Yeah.
they had a trust paying tax that it should have never paid tax. It should have passed it out to the individual, pay it at a lower tax rate. But just they didn't click the right button inside the trust. At least he was smart enough to say, I'm going to give it to you. I don't know what
I'm going to let a
doing.
professional look at it because
And
that's
boom.
the name
Yep.
of the game. That's the
Yeah.
name of the book, Keep What's Yours. That's the name of the show that we're doing right now, Keep What's Yours. It's what Jeff does for a living, senior tax strategist, wealth advisor. He's both, which is great because you can talk to him about your taxes, but you can also talk to him about your retirement.
Exactly.
And Jeff's pegged me at 73 for retirement.
73 and a half.
Oh, great.
Since I saw your stuff Wednesday.
Oh, God. It's even worse than I thought. But that's the name. Keep more of your money.
Yes.
Why are you trying to do your own taxes and then you realize, you know what would be the worst? Is if I came in and I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm just going to let Jeff do it this year. And you say, bring in your taxes from last year. And I bring in my tax. And you say, you know, Josh, you could have kept $1,000 more.
Yeah.
You could have kept, you know, if you would have just done this, you could have kept $2,000.
Uh-huh.
And I'm sitting here going, what? And these are just things that are out there inside the tax code that I don't know how to access. Yeah. Even if I heard whispers at a cocktail party about, oh, you know, we're doing the 529, I don't know how to implement that into my life and have it taken out of my paycheck. We don't really have an HR department here at the Big 550.
It's going to go, oh, hey, do this or do that.
Yeah. It's like if I would ask somebody around the hey, how do I implement a 529 on my paycheck? And they'd be like, what?
As they go down the hall.
Yeah. They'd say, call Jeff Zufall. Okay. All right. So maybe you've heard some of these things and you're like, well, maybe we could try that this. If you don't do it, you won't get it.
Exactly.
And that's just it. And I want to say, if you go and see Jeff, there's something that you're not doing that he can do for you.
Exactly.
So you're leaving money on the table. And the last thing I would hate is for you to realize that you missed out on something.
Yeah. And we see that all the time. And or we got to go back. This time of year, we can't do it now, but we'll come back and we'll amend 3 years worth of tax returns if we see that we can fix it. And we've done that 4 or 5 times. We've seen where an individual did it. They forgot to actually put the trades, the stock trades from 2 years ago. I've seen that about 4 or 5 times this year where the dividends were put in off the 1099. So the dividends and interest and capital gain were computed. But it's almost like they forgot about the bottom of the 1099, which is the stock trades. They're all losses from 2022. Everybody was selling at a
you
loss.
Can claim losses.
So you get to take a deduction. You get $3,000 a year, or your losses offset any capital gain out there. And so I think we amended at least 3 returns this year alone where they kind of forgot to put the losses on there.
So if you have $5,000 in capital gains and you've got $5,000 in capital losses,
it's a push.
It's a push.
Yeah.
And I would regularly be just paying 15 to 20% on $5,000. What is that? That's $1,000.
Exactly.
And I'm just giving that to the government because I didn't know.
Yeah. So
I could offset that.
All 3 of these resulted in capital loss carry forwards, which means their gains were wiped out for the year. They didn't pay any tax on them. And then anything they didn't use from a loss carries forward to the next tax year until you use it up. And you get $3,000 against ordinary income on top of that.
And you would think that if somebody were kind of partaking in the stock market like this, that would be something that they would know,
but not from a tax angle. They just knew they lost money.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, I lost money. And I'm like, well, here's how it's to your advantage if it's in a regular taxable account.
You can write that off, brother.
Yes.
Come on. So it's things like that you just don't realize are even out there. So how can you take advantage of this? How can you keep more of your money if you don't even know that it's a thing?
Yeah. If you don't know, you don't know.
That is just the number one thing to call Jeff right now, 636 394-5524, Capital Advisory Group. If your 2022, taxes are done or you're in the process of doing them, maybe it's too late, but
not necessarily. There's stuff that we can, just like what we were explaining, stuff we can look at. If we see it, we can fix it. We may not amend it or fix it right away. It'll be after the 18th. We'll come back to it just because the flow of business right now is phenomenal. We're trying to make sure we get the stuff out the door in a timely manner. So.
But how about this? You bring your stuff into Jeff and say, hey, my last year was real messy and they want me to pay a bunch of money. What can you do for them? Well, you can say, going forward, let's fix the problem.
Going forward, we can fix all kinds of stuff.
Not only can we get you to not pay, but we can get you a tax return next year. Walking around the office, somebody said, hey, Josh, what's Jeff's number? I seem to pay every year, and it's getting worse and worse. And, I told you about it, and you said, well, the first thing is check your withholdings.
Yes.
Maybe you just have a fat finger number.
Especially in this environment. Not so much a fat finger, but in this environment, there's no stimulus checks out there anymore. There's no, I'll say, crutches in a sense that people were relying on.
The child tax credit, the stimulus checks, these are all things that aren't there anymore. Yeah. So if I had a tax return last year where I got money back, maybe I owe this year.
You might get a little bit less back this year, especially child tax credit. Anybody that has a kid under 18, under 17 technically, will not like their tax return this year because it goes from 36 to 2.
Yeah.
So that's the issue. So
you can eyeball somebody's stuff and just say you're not having enough withheld.
Yes.
Number one, change that.
That's the
and you'll pay it in small amounts throughout the year, every paycheck, rather than get a big bill.
Either and a big
I
bill.
know that's the way I would want to do it.
Yeah. And if you're over $1,000 to the feds or the state, and this is any state, they love to ding you for the underpayment penalties. So they're going to come along and do a tax on top of a tax.
It's like, hey, why don't you just tell me throughout the year that I was underpaying? Well, that's not really our job.
Well, exactly.
And since you underpaid, we're gonna ding you.
Yeah, we're going to add more to it.
We're going to add more to it.
So the other side of the equation is and a lot of people say, oh, I'll deal with it, make estimated payments. So that's calendar quarter. Don't forget about them. So it would be April, June, September, and January of next year. So 2020, January 15th of 2024. And that counts for your 2023 tax return.
Yes.
So old school days, you used to make that January 15th payment right at Christmas, or basically pay it before the end of the year. That way you got a credit on this year's return for it, especially to the states. But since the SALT, which is state and local taxes, you're capped at $10,000, 95% of America, doesn't matter. Pay it in January. Don't worry about it.
Before we go to break, we're going to come back and talk about the banking industry, what's going on there. The interest rates rose again by a quarter of a percentage point. I want to just say again, I drive around in my car. I listen to all the different radio stations. There's the guy that keeps coming on saying the IRS is coming after you. And it's like he doesn't mention why. Well, because he says, if you haven't paid in 3 years, the IRS is beating down your door. Well, rewind that.
Yes.
If you haven't paid in why haven't you paid your taxes in 3 years? This isn't a show here that we're doing right now to say, don't avoid your fair share of taxes. You have to pay something.
Exactly.
This is the show to say you don't have to pay as much as you are.
Exactly. And that's the key to it.
How to pay the bare minimum.
Yep.
So I heard him another commercial the other day that said something to the tune of, the IRS doesn't need a reason to garnish your wages. Well, but
technically, yes.
But they're probably garnishing your wages because you haven't paid them in years.
The garnishment, actually it's referred to as a levy, is what it really is. Levy gets your attention. That means that the IRS would like to talk to you. And so to get your attention,
and you're not calling them back.
You're not calling them back. They don't really call you, but they're sending you letters in the mail. And literally, they'll just do a levy to your bank account, show up one day, and go poof, take everything out. Whether it's 10 times what your tax is or $100, they don't care. They levy your bank account. That gets your attention, and then we'll get you talking with them.
Yeah.
And the money that they take is applied to your tax owed. If there was more money taken, then they give you a refund back. But typically it works the opposite way, which is there's not enough in your bank account to cover the tax that you owe. That's why you didn't pay it in the first place.
Right.
So they basically say, hey, you paid this tax, we're good, and they go from there. So
And look, I think it sounds awful that the government can come in and just take money out of your account, but why aren't you answering the letters? Why are you not paying your taxes? I mean, this is it's a free country, and we don't want to pay more taxes than we have
what
to.
you're
but
legally obligated to.
It is a necessary evil, and don't ignore the tax man. Give Jeff a call, 636-394-5524, and say, before it gets to that point, can we please address this?
Either that, or if we can't help you, we're going to turn you off to a tax attorney who has all kinds of fun games that can be played with them.
And you could do payment plans.
Yes, exactly.
You can, pay them as much as you can to rectify the situation.
Exactly.
Because as you always tell us, not only do they say, well, you owe us this, but then they say, plus all of the interest and the late payment fees and the other fees.
Yep, exactly.
It's like, well, I couldn't pay my original tax bill. How am I supposed to pay all these fees?
That. Exactly.
Address it so that you don't have any fees. If you don't think you can pay your taxes this year, talk to Jeff. Call him now and say, let's get an extension. Let's set up some sort of payment plan. 636-394-5524, because if you don't pay them at all, that's when they start hitting you with fees.
Interest.
And interest.
Quarterly interest going forward is huge. And in the past, it wasn't terribly bad. I don't want to say that, but it was 1-point-something% a quarter. You go, time value of money. Could you do something else with it and then pay them at the end of the year? And the answer was yes. You can make money in the market. You could use it for payroll, whatever you had to do. Today's environment, I believe it's 5.2 a quarter.
Oh my gosh.
It's not cheap. It's it adds up quickly. So
don't just bury your head in the sand. That's literally the worst thing you can do. Address your tax issues, and you won't have the IRS breathing down your neck, and you can set up a nice little payment plan.
Yep.
And, I don't want to pay taxes either, but I know that I have to.
Yes.
Exactly. And if you are one of these people that hates taxes, Jeff should be the first person you call because he can't make you not pay taxes, but he can make sure that you're paying your fair share and not a penny more.
Yes.
That's the point. And maybe find a couple maneuvers like we're doing with our
just to save you $1,000 here, $2,000 there.
FSA. We're keeping $1,200 a year, and I expect that to double. So just things that you can do on your taxes every time you get a paycheck that Jeff can set up for you to make sure that all that tax money that was going out, maybe you're able to keep a little bit more in your pocket this year.
That's it. Name of the game.
That's the name of the game. 636-394-5524, CapitalAdvisoryGrp.com. Let's go to commercial break. Jeff Zufall. Google him. Find where he is. I just went out to Ellisville and dropped all my stuff off. We had a nice little chat, and I guess when it's done, we'll come back out. I'll bring my wife this time, and we can go over what we did and look to the next 9 months.
Yes.
And say, what more can we do? So that's the name of the game. Just take a look at what you're doing. Take a look at every paycheck stub that you get and say, what more can I be doing with my money? And what more can I be doing to look at this little column that says federal, state.
Federal, state,
Medicare, Social Security. What can I do to make that column smaller?
Yes.
And there are things out there for you. We'll go to commercial break, and when we come back, the banking issues that are out there today. Jeff thinks that they're a little bit overblown.
Yes.
But we'll talk about what's going on. Why are 3 different banks in 2 different countries going under?
Yes.
We'll find out. It's Keep What's Yours with Jeff Zufall on the Big 550 KTRS.
Keep What's Yours continues with Josh Gilbert and Jeff Zufall.
Back on the Big 550 KTRS, back to Keep What's Yours with Jeff Zufall. We're talking about how you can keep more of your money on your paycheck, not going out to the federal government. If you're one of these people that are picketing in front of City Hall and the state capitol saying taxation is theft and all that stuff. Great, more power to you. But there is a way that you don't have to pay as much in taxes as what you're currently doing if you have implemented nothing.
Exactly.
If you have nothing going on and nothing being taken out of your paycheck and no FSAs or HSAs and everything, you're leaving money
on the table.
Well, not on the table. You're leaving money in the coffers of the IRS.
Of the IRS in the states.
You're sending them more money than you legally have to. So how do you figure out how to keep more of your money? Well, you give Jeff a call, 636-394-5524. Enlist someone to go through your stuff and help you find the things that are in the tax code that you can utilize, but you never knew they were there. Like you said in the last segment, the older adults that are retired that make less than $30,000.
Yeah.
What, you can write off your mortgage insurance?
Well, it's your real estate tax.
Your real estate taxes.
You get a piece of it back in what's called the circuit breaker. So it just helps out the older America.
Who even knew that was there?
You wouldn't unless you got it in the past.
Yeah. How do I know to ask for it? Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Go into Jeff's office and say circuit breaker, and he'll say, great, have a
Yes.
seat. And let's go and see if you qualify. So that's kind of how it works. Give him a call. He's out in Ellisville. Now, the banking collapse. We talked about this last week's SVP,
Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank out of New York.
Bank. So one's on the West Coast, one's on the East Coast.
And one is from Switzerland, which is
Credit Suisse.
Credit Suisse. So you got a single Credit Suisse has to sit to the side. The reason being is Credit Suisse has had issues since probably 2000. And it was management issues. It was one misstep after another misstep after another. They just made a bad decision even worse as they went forward. But SVB and Signature Bank is your good old-fashioned – first, to set the stage, first you have to realize the average person did not deal with these banks. And maybe there's a handful of people that did business with them.
This isn't my corner bank. I need to take out cash to give to my nephew for his birthday. You're
not having your check deposited in their account and then writing checks against it or putting money in your savings account. Those two banks catered to technology, startup tech companies, and basically Signature Bank dealt with, they were the intermediary when you buy crypto. Runs through Signature Bank and it goes to whatever purse that's going to hold that
So the one over in New York had a lot of crypto stuff.
Yes. So what took place, though, is the big picture is, and to you and I and probably 99.9% of our listeners, the Federal Reserve has FDIC insurance, which basically will cover you up to $250,000 per account. So if a bank goes down, and it's happened around here a ton, the bank goes down, you really don't even know it until the next day they change the name. FDIC comes in, covers everybody's money, brands the bank, if you want to call it that, and poof, next day they're off to the races.
Under $250,000. So, right now, hey, it was a good couple of weeks, and I haven't spent a lot of money. I got a couple $1,000s in there.
Yeah.
So
you're good to go. There's no questions asked.
Who are the people? And I ask you this all the time. What do I do if I have leftover money? Who are the people that have $250,000 or more in a bank?
How about $117 million sitting?
$117 million.
Which is the company Roku, which is the TV.
I have several Rokus.
Plugged in, exactly. Roku, as a company, had $117 million sitting in there. Peter Thiel, which is PayPal, had $147 million sitting in that bank. So the big picture is, yes, $250 is FDI insurance. But when this went down on the Wednesday, this was 2 weeks ago, Wednesday, they were a perfectly fine bank. Somebody saw smoke somewhere. Nobody knows what they saw or what took place. And then somebody else yelled fire. And literally there was $48 billion that moved out of that bank, SVB, on Thursday. So what takes place is reserves. So anybody ever go to the bank, try and get cash. Good luck.
The bank vault is just not.
The reserve levels are terrible. And again, a bank.
I don't deposit $100 and they put it in the vault and say, this is for when Josh comes back to get it.
So technically,
what do they do?
About $7 of that goes into reserve. The rest is loaned right back out the door. So you walk in the bank on Saturday and you put your $100 in your checking account and you're like, oh, I'm saved $100. As you're walking out, that person that's walking back in, they're borrowing money to buy a car or a house.
Car loans, house loans.
That money's going right out the door.
Home equity loans.
That's how a bank operates, and that's how a bank makes money. The difference between your money market and your brokerage account and the national bank or the credit union down the street or the regional bank down the street, that money market doesn't really loan money out. The bank, that's how they make their money. So
okay. So somebody comes in, I deposit $100. And someone comes in and says, I want to borrow $95. They'll give
your money,
my money, to that person
at 6%.
They'll charge them 6% interest, and then they'll give me
like a 0.2% interest,
and
that's
back.
how they make their money.
It looks.
Now imagine that.
Sounds like they're making good money.
Exactly.
How does a bank go under?
So the problem is this: is the bank, that $6 reserve, it's going to have cash on hand, and maybe $2 of that $6 on reserve. They're forced by the Federal Reserve to go buy U.S. Treasuries. So this is where it gets really interlinked. The Federal Reserve has been raising interest rates for the last year and 2 months. And what takes place is those treasuries that bank's been buying are down in value. So when they raise interest rates, the rate.
Wait. Let's go back. Because this is one of the things that I wanted to try to understand. You buy a U.S. Treasury bond.
Yes.
At 4% interest rate. And then 2 years later, the Treasury bonds are at 6% interest rate.
Yes.
How did I just lose money?
Because you might have a 4-year bond, okay? And typically it's between 2 and 5 are what they're referenced. 2-year bond or 2-year Treasury or 5-year Treasury. As long as you hold that Treasury to maturity, you get your money back. No questions asked, even if it declines in value. So when it comes back, you get paid face value, boom. So if you put $1,000 in a bond today and interest rates went up over the next 2 years, your value of your bond would go down in value, but you'd still get that yield. And when it matures in 2 years, you get your $1,000 back. But what took place at SVB is all their cash that was sitting around, they had to give it out. They had to pay back the depositors. And then when they run out of cold cash.
There was a run on the bank, and everybody said, I want my $100 million.
Yeah, now.
And like 50 people said, I want my $100 million. That's a lot of money.
It's a bunch of money.
That's billions of dollars.
A bunch of money going out the door. So what takes place is when the cash is gone, then the bank has to go to those treasuries, and they have to sell those treasuries because they don't have any choice. They can't go, wait. But you got to wait a year or 2 years.
I need to wait 2 years for this to mature. If you sell it before the maturity date,
it's a realized loss,
and you're getting hit.
You're getting hit heavy, and that's what took. So it compounded the issue of just a run on the bank. So big picture, at the end of the day, it was just one comedy of errors after another. One, the federal government has now stepped in and they're backing everybody in full. And you say, oh, wait a minute, that's not fair. Let's talk contagion in the big picture. And what takes place is if the average person sitting, at their kitchen table listening to this heard that SVB went down and they didn't guarantee the money, whether it's $100 million or it's $1 million or it's $100, there'd be multiple runs on banks across the country.
Well, I would say, and that's not my bank, that's not my problem.
Or you'd say, wait a minute, they didn't cover that money there. What about my bank? I might go give $50 out just to be safe.
Oh, I see.
That's a run on the bank.
I see.
The feds stress test these banks from, you name it, high interest rate environments to if the executives take too big of a bonus, if they open too many branches, they don't open enough, and everything you could dream of. But the Achilles heel of a bank, of a true bank, is a true run on the bank. Everybody wants their money tomorrow. It's not there, period. So that's exactly what it was. It's
designed to not be there.
Exactly.
But you just hope that you never get a run on the bank.
That's the issue.
And I'm sitting here saying, not my bank, not my problem. But just to be on the safe side, I'm going to go to my bank and take my money out.
Yeah,
then all of a sudden, now there's a run on my bank.
Exactly.
And the dominoes start falling.
It gets bad quick.
Is this where that phrase, too big to fail,
Yes.
comes in?
Yes. Everything that they stress test for, every angle they look at, and they all got flying. There was SVB Bank on Wednesday was a perfectly solvent bank. There was nothing wrong with them, other than everybody asked for their money back on the same day.
Do we know yet why everyone started getting cold feet and went to go take out $100 million?
No, we don't. That's the one thing that I'd really want to know. Hey, who said
started
what?
whispering?
Now, there was also a couple of senators that said, we have to shut down Facebook. Anybody that says anything about the banking industry, they need to be shut down. And you go, where's free speech at? That's
Right.
a little extreme. But I see their concern. And again,
it really is like yelling fire in a crowded movie
exactly
theater.
what it is. So all the talking heads on TV.
What if there actually is a fire?
Yeah. Well, you want to run.
Right.
But all the talking heads have said this is, a banking industry and this and that. The side effect of the Fed trying to combat inflation and raising interest rates like they have, the side effect is the treasuries that the banks are forced to buy have gone down in value. No different than your portfolio and my portfolio. There's nothing you could do around it other than sit and wait for that time frame to expire, and that treasury you go whole basically when that 2 year, 5 year, 10 year.
So if my personal account, maybe I'm down because the market's been a little down, but I'm not going in to cash in until I'm 73
Exactly.
and retired. So I got time to wait. If I was forced if someone said, Josh, you owe us this money, you need to liquidate your account. If I was forced to sell right now, I'd be selling at a loss.
At a loss.
And that's what happened to the bank.
Exactly. So SVB sold probably 25%. And this isn't where they just have a couple $1,000 in treasuries.
Yeah.
They have a couple $100 million in treasuries.
25% of hundreds of millions of dollars.
Is a huge hit. Not that it would have saved them, but still they were already basically down, and they had to sell it at a loss, which was like a double whammy.
Yeah.
So that's why these two individual banks have basically just been hammered, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, we need more regulation, we need this, we need that.
Well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about now, because you're explaining this to me, and I'm thinking to myself, these banks have hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of other people's money. If they go under, the government just steps in and says, we'll cover it. What are the consequences here? Are banks being regulated enough?
Well, the worst part is a member of the Federal Reserve out of San Francisco sat on the board of SVB. So they should have said, oh, hey, we're probably going to raise rates in the future. You guys might want to worry about that and not buy as many treasuries as you did.
Yeah.
Who knows whether they're talking or not? I don't know. But the politics in it have gotten really dumb over the last week or so. Again, at the end of the day, it's a good old-fashioned bank run, just with bigger numbers.
Yeah.
Because in the past, like in the 20s and 30s, there were bank runs. There were tons of them, through the Depression. But people were going there to get $100, and they would stand in line to get their cash. If you went to a bank today and said, I got $10,000 in XYZ bank, I'm not going to name anybody, and I want my $10,000 today, you show up, they'll go, hey, we'll give you $2,500. We're going to order the rest of the money, and it'll be here in 7 days. We'll call you when it comes in.
Because banks don't keep that much.
They don't.
Just like my Domino's delivery driver.
Exactly.
He
doesn't keep cash
on them anymore.
Exactly.
So that's interesting.
Yeah. So that's part of the discussion. The real discussion today is, should banks' reserves be pushed up even higher? But then you go, hey, that's now going to make that bank not that much more profitable, because now they got to hold more cash sitting to the sidelines and they can't loan it out.
Well, we talk about this all the time. If you have $100,000, I always have to ask my wife, how much do you need in the bank, cash on hand, to sleep comfortably at night? If I have $100,000 in cash, I don't want to just let it sit in a bank somewhere. I want to push it into the market. I want to
either into the
go
market,
buy rental properties.
into the market, and or to a money market where you're just going to get a little bit better rate of return and still no risk. That's the beauty of it.
Right. Like if I put it into rental property, I can't get the cash out unless I sell it and liquidate.
You got to go back to that bank and say, hey, I want to do a line of credit against my rental property, and then you're borrowing money.
But the bank is the same way. They don't want to just have hundreds of millions of dollars sitting in the vaults.
Exactly.
They want to make money off of that money.
They have to. I mean, that's basically they have to make money. Otherwise, they're a non-profitable bank. That's an issue.
Yeah.
And you don't want a bunch of non-profitable banks out there that blow up strictly from, hey, we didn't make enough money. Sorry, we got to close. You want them to make money within a reason. And again, that's a whole nother scenario.
Yeah.
But you also want them to be, and I'll say, the ability to loan money in the community to keep stuff going as
that's
we go
important.
forward.
If
That's
I want to go to the
super
bank and get a loan for a rental property,
exactly.
I want to be able to do that. If the bank's not loaning money out,
Whether it's a rental property, a car, your first house, your 10th house,
you're slamming the brakes on
exactly.
the economy.
And that's one of the things that they're talking is now the tightening to the consumer, the tightening of the loan requirements, higher interest rates, shorter terms. Maybe they loan to a 690 credit score. Maybe they're going to raise that to a 740, 800 being the highest. Crazy stuff like that. Which it doesn't hurt the banks; it hurts the consumers at the end of the day. And that's kind of where we're sitting. So, you go, hey, they probably need to raise the reserve requirements, but then where do they put that cash? A little on my pay grade, but that's where we're sitting today.
Yeah, and we're going to talk interest rates in the next segment, but I just want to wrap the banking conversation up here. Credit Suisse over in Switzerland.
Yeah, they had issue after issue after, and it was just kind of that scenario. So UBS,
were they related at all?
Not at all.
Not at all.
No, they were probably, even if these two banks, SVB and Signature, if they wouldn't have gone down, the Swiss government blames us, U.S. We caused it, blah, blah, blah. But basically, UBS is stepping in and buying them.
Yeah.
And then there's a consortium of banks that are stepping up, and I believe, don't quote me on this, like $80 billion, $60 billion that they've rounded up that these banks are going to loan to Signature Bank to keep them functioning and operating. Whereas at SVB, that's the other question, is the Federal Reserve, somebody's flipping the bill and covering everybody's deposits. So,
and who's that somebody? Well, it might be taxpayers.
Biden said no taxpayer money would be used for it. But again, at the end of the day, I mean, I think he was kind of forced to say that, to say, hey, we're good. Nobody go run to their banks.
Calm down, everyone.
Yeah. So again, yes, there probably will be taxpayer money tossed into it, into the swirl or the mix. But
wasn't it just a lot nicer and more charming when all we had to worry about was a run on the toilet paper stocks?
Yes.
A couple of years ago.
Well, sort of. Depends.
Yeah. At least at the end of the day, if I was out of toilet paper, I could use my paper money.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And a lot of it.
Yeah. But a run on the banks, that's scary.
Yeah.
And that could have a domino effect on my bank.
It could have a huge domino, and that's why they got in front of it quickly, stepped out there, said, hey, we're good, don't go crazy. The Federal Reserve also monitors every bank out there. They have it sounds crazy, they have the ability to pump money to that bank, but not billions of dollars instantaneously.
Yeah. And I would be very interested, watch this space, very interested to find out who started this bank run.
Yes.
Who's whispering, who saw fire, who saw smoke.
Did one of these $100 million accounts say, hey, we're going to move our money from here to there?
And that
kind of triggered it. And
why is Roku moving their
exactly.
money? They must know something I don't.
Exactly. Oh, I'm going to take my money too, and then boom, you got a chain reaction.
And a company like that, they got to pay payroll.
Well, and that's the flip side. You say, hey, the Feds have backed them completely. Nobody lost a nickel. So was that $117 million? Was that Roku's payroll? Which,
like, if I worked for them and it's payday on Friday, and they didn't have enough money to pay me, now
It's even
Wall Street hits Main Street.
Oh, yeah, it's even worse than just a chain reaction on the banks. Now you got a chain reaction on the banks. You have people not getting their paychecks.
Now my mortgage isn't getting paid.
Yes. You then have vendors not getting paid, and it's 2008 within 3-day scenario.
Oh,
again.
boy.
So.
All right, well, let's talk in the next segment. We'll go to commercial break. We'll talk in the next segment. How is this all tied into the interest rate hike that we just had of 1/4 of a percentage point? And it all seems to be interconnected.
Oh, yeah, it is. It gets deep in the economic side of it.
So let's go to commercial break. But remember, if you don't like paying taxes or you need help filing your taxes, Jeff is here for you. 636-394-5524. The name of the game, Keep What's Yours. The name of the book, the name of the show that we're doing. Keep more of your money in your pocket, in your bank account, to do whatever you want.
Yes.
If you want to run to the bank and grab it, it's there. It's not in the hands of the federal government. And the federal government is okay with this.
Yes.
Because they wrote a tax code that nobody's ever read.
No.
That actually throws a couple of bones in there for people like you and me.
Exactly.
So we can take advantage of the tax code. And, who wrote the tax code? Well, it wasn't the politicians. It was the aides. Of the politicians.
Yes.
But, you want to kiss on the lips the senators and the representatives that actually put something in there that I can use.
Yes.
For my kids or for their college or, for my medical, to offset my medical account. These politicians, they're, selfish, self-interested, but every once in a while, they'll throw us a bone. How do I access that using the tax code? You call Jeff.
Exactly.
636-394-5524. It seems pretty easy to me.
Yeah, super simple.
So just give them a call and get the wheels started. We'll come back. Percentage points. Raise the interest rates. We'll see how it affects us.
Keep What's Yours continues with Josh Gilbert and Jeff Zufall.
Back on the Big 550, back to Keep What's Yours with Jeff Zufall. Really quickly, interest rates are up 1/4 of a point. What is that?
So that basically this will be the 9th rate hike in a little bit over, I guess, February of 21 is when February of 22 is when they started raising rates. So we'll be just over a year. So we're at 9 rate hikes. Last one is up 1/4. So again, 30 to us. So the interest rate that the Fed does is the interest rate that banks loan money to each other overnight. Mm-hmm. It really has no bearing on us at all.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So when you see the Fed raise rates 1/4, the problem is credit cards, the banks, auto loans all jump on that bandwagon, and by this morning they've already built in that extra 1/4 higher.
So the federal interest rate is just for bank to bank.
Bank to bank. That's
but
it.
The mortgage
industry
will jump on that.
Yes. So
a car loan will jump on that too, because now it's more expensive for them to
exactly
to loan money out.
Yeah. So we're sitting
trickle down.
Yeah, big time. So we're at 6.94%. So this is as of I think Wednesday. As of Wednesday, they said the 30-year fixed on the average was 6.9%, and it's actually down just a shade from where it was a couple weeks ago. So rates have actually come down again, even though overall rates go up. So anything that you look at is prime plus something is what you're going to pay. So it's basically 6.9 as we sit. And again, so they raised rates, like I said, 7 times in 22. And you go, okay, that's the most aggressive interest rate hike historically ever. I mean, makes the 80s look naive. If you look at a chart, this year, 2022, is a straight line up versus in the 80s, it was a slow kind of, gradual increase. So you say, and this ties to inflation. So the highest inflation was in June of 21, and it was 9.1%. That was the all-time high. We're sitting at 6.04 today.
Okay.
We won't know what March is until they announce it April 12th, whatever March's interest rate is. But
regular inflation is normally like 2%, right?
The Fed's target is 2 to 2.5% annually.
Okay.
So we're still at 6.04.
604 compared to 9.1. Shoo.
So,
but we're still 4 percentage points higher than what what the target is.
And it took 9 rate hikes to get it from 9.1 to 6.
To get it down.
So again, not saying that this is the way you do the math, but to take that to a 2 or 2.5% rate, I mean, that rate's going to have to go up 4 times where it is today. That's called hyperinflation, is what that's called.
Yeah.
Which we had in the 80s. But again, the Fed, there's talk that the Fed has hypothetically paused. They didn't come out and say it, but there is verbiage saying that they're pausing. And again, collateral damage in a sense. It takes a little bit for this to kind of cook into the markets to see what really takes place. But also, it's pinching the banks like what we were just talking about. Anybody in treasuries getting hammered if you were sitting in it. And it's even worse in a mutual fund, because the mutual fund bond has 100 different treasuries tied into it that mature at all different times. So literally, you don't have that ability to just sit and hold that to a maturity date, because there isn't one. It's open-ended. So that's kind of where we're sitting today.
Because they'll sell off some and then buy some more. And then
exactly.
Some comes up next year, and then some comes up a year from then. Yeah. Huh. I didn't realize that's how mutual funds work. Well, let's talk about that maybe in the next show. We'll talk about the rates in the next show. Just, I don't want to put too much on your plate, because it is knee-deep, waist deep.
Waist deep.
In tax time. So maybe we'll just do a generic show next week and try to explain a little bit of some of the lighter side of things, or the more
the good stuff.
The good stuff, and get your mind off of people's tax returns.
Yes.
But that's what Jeff does throughout the week. So when he comes in here next week, we'll be gentle to him and not remind him that April 15th, or in this case, April 18th,
is coming around the corner.
Approaching. If you need your taxes done, 636-394-5524. If you are looking at your tax situation and you say, it could be better than what it is now, give Jeff a call. Just because your taxes might be done this year doesn't mean that you're not going to have to do them again next year.
Yes.
How can you lower that tax bill over the course of the next 9 months? Well, 2024, Josh, is going to be thanking 2023, Josh.
Exactly.
Because I'm taking care of it. I'm talking to Jeff, and we're getting it taken care of. 636-394-5524. This is the whole you'll thank me later thing.
Exactly.
Take care of it now, and you'll thank yourself later. Capital Advisory Group, Jeff Zufall, thank you so much.
Thank you. See you next week.
See ya.
You've been listening to Keep What's Yours with Josh Gilbert and Jeff Zufall, Senior Tax Strategist and Wealth Manager at Capital Advisory Group. To learn more, call 636-394-5524 or visit CapitalAdvisoryGrp.com.